Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Frank Barberry, and we got Aris Quinones. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Glad to have you. Obviously, we're here today to discuss kind of your follow-up to Astonishing Times, Rise of Kokin, which we'll get into later. For both of you, how did this adventure even start getting into comics itself?
For me, mine's a shorter one. Frank's got a lot longer history. Essentially, me and Frank became buddies through his book on Image, Five Ghosts. I was still hosting Variant at the time, but we're a comic book channel that promotes comic books and stuff like that. Through mutual friends, met Frank, and I was like, "Yo, this is a really good book." And I was like, "Hey, would you ever want to write a comic?" And he's like, "With me?" And he's like, "Yeah, you set me up whenever, blah, blah." Flash forward a few years. I'm like, "It's time to write a comic, Frank." And he's like, "Let's do it."
10 plus years later.
Yeah. Because I always
knew
because Astonishing Times is the first thing I've ever done. So like, I knew if I was going to jump into the world of comic books, I needed to have like a co-writer, someone to kind of like back me up, and I needed a Yoda, right? I needed to be the Padawan to someone's Yoda. And me and Frank just went back and forth for a year or so before we nailed down what Astonishing Times is. And now we're on volume 2. Frank has way more credits to his name than I do. Right now I only got the 2, but onward and upward. Yeah.
But yeah, I had gosh, it feels very long ago now, but I had gone to school to be an English teacher in college. Despite reading like a ton of comics, I never understood the pipeline of like creator-owned comics. I think I actually read in Wizard about how Image was submission driven, like in like the year 2000, and it hadn't even dawned on me. I was like, oh wait, it probably was more like 2003-ish, but I was like, oh wow, you can just like hire artists to draw your comics and Image Comics will publish them with no friction. Like, not true, but so in college I started taking out extra money out of my student loans, real bad idea, and commissioning comic artists to start drawing my comics. Managed to make one book that actually came out through Arcana called Divine Intervention while I was in college. That is very bad. You can probably still buy it somewhere, but it was a big milestone for me. I learned how to letter. Yeah. I had taken screenwriting in college and felt like I learned story structure there, but fast forward there, I did a bunch of comic pitches, made a bunch of friends, and like really was focusing. And finally, in 2013, I broke in with Five Ghosts at Image. Luckiest day of my life, was a great experience. And just from there, just kept writing. I wrote full time for almost 8 years, and then snuck away to do some work in video games, where I kind of straddle both now, getting a lot more back into comics after taking a break. But as Eris said, we met when I was doing Five Ghosts, and he was interested in writing something. I was like, yeah, we'll get to it. Like, again, I love doing as many projects as I can. I love working with co-writers, as like, again, the fun part is breaking the story and then someone draws it. And so we finally started putting our heads together. Geez, was it like 2018, Eris? I think like.
Yeah,
Activision. Yeah, finally, like you seriously like cornered me a little. We're like, hey, are we gonna do this? I was like, yeah, let's go. Like I don't really have anything else I'm working on right now. And Eris was like very adamant that we do a superhero comic. And at the time I was like, I don't know if I would have it in me to do superhero stuff right now, like especially creator owned. But he was super enthusiastic, which got me excited. And then we kind of found our own way into it. And we managed to sync up with Ruri after a few other artists we had worked with. Yeah. So Eris got the full exposure of how long it takes to get it right, even though it was his first book. He got all the fun lessons. But we're so happy to get Ruri Coleman as our co-creator, artistic collaborator on the book. And Lauren Affey colored the first volume, had done a bunch of work with me before. Five Ghosts was when I met her way back. And yeah, we did that first volume and thankfully came back now for a second. And now we have Andrew Kramer coloring this volume, and Taylor Esposito, Ghost Glyph Studios, does our lettering, and Dylan Todd did our logos, which are great. But yeah, I've worked all over the place over the years. And again, coming back to this book was a lot of fun because really, like, I definitely stepped back on my comics output, and we like really thought about like, okay, what would we want to do as a modern superhero comic? Like, especially with volume 1, like that was very much our like, what angle can we take that doesn't just feel like our take on superheroes? And now in volume 2, we're kind of like having a little more fun and embellishment in our universe, telling the backstory of Kokin, one of our characters. And again, I feel like we have lots of room in the universe that we managed to create. In many hours talking to Eris when we were, and Ruri as well. Ruri's been fantastic and actually has written a lot in this volume with us. So it's been great to have him and have him be so enthusiastic.
Yeah. Now it's interesting with comics. Obviously, you have your writer and generally your artist, or now surprisingly, writer and artist, like Beneath the Trees and whatnot. What's it like having two writers? Do you guys have a process where someone starts the outline, someone then adds in, and you guys just go back and forth? Or do you kind of write two similar stories and then interweave them?
The first one, I would say. Yeah.
I would say, I was going to say, can I get a hot take on this, Eris? Well, for me, like, I feel like, and I've co-written a few things now. This, I think, has been the most, like, kind of fruitful and long form. But, like, for me, I feel like comic scripts are not super exciting. They are like blueprints for the artist to draw, and like some people will embellish them, and everyone will read Alan Moore's scripts, and like that's good and well. But like truly, like the real meat of it is when you're breaking the story, and that's like when we co-write, we sit down and discuss like, hey, like what's the overarching like story of our book going to be? Like then we get granular issue by issue, like what are cool like beats and scenes, and then like we physically go to write. And by the time you're writing it, like we've discussed it all, like yeah, we'll put dialogue in and do some dialogue passes back and forth. But the real like meat of it is that like idea breaking process. And that is so much more fun to do with another person than by yourself. Like, again, it's why you have like TV writers room and things like that. So for me, it's been a very organic process because I've definitely talked to writers who have done things where like you write 10 pages, I write 10 pages, and we jam them together. And like, I'm sure it works, but with this, it feels a lot more
cohesive,
organic. And again, like, as Iris said, that like, and I think a lot of people get this, like it helps, I think, with co-writers who haven't like written a comic before, like understand like, oh no, your ideas are valid, your creativity is valid. Like, yeah, you haven't like written in a comic script, but like whatever, that's not the hard part, right? Like that part we can transcribe, and I'm sure his sound went out. but no, and that's really been the joy. And as I said, it was nice to do that with another person, especially when we're trying to do a book that touches a lot of characters, that has a lot of universe stuff. Eris, I can kick that back to you as you got to live that process. But
I did, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's basically that. Like the bulk of the writing comes down, like you said, we've had like mini writing summits because we don't live that far from each other. We're only like 3 hours away from each other, so we'll meet up for like a day or so, and then we outline like the whole arc, like all 5 issues, pretty much like the big beats, like what we want to happen in issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll get more granular with it, you know, like page by page. And then, you know, to Frank's point, what he said, by then it's like, since you know what's going to happen, the dialogue is more or less already there. You're just getting ready, you know, you're getting into like the nitty gritty of like, how do you want them to say it? What exactly do you want them to say? But you know what point it has to end on because you've already bullet pointed it all out. So it's been really, really cool. I mean, I dig it because it's fun. Like Frank said, though, it's like you really do all the writing, at least for us, the process we've done on AT, as we call it, Astonishing Times, has been that like the bulk of like, this is the story. This is how it's gonna. We do what Lost didn't do. You do a beginning, middle, and end.
I love Lost. I strike that from my record, but it's fair. Eris takes shot at Lost, but no, and that was nice because Ruri came on a little late last time. I feel like we had issues, like a few issues written, and he still brought a lot of good ideas to it. But it was nice to have him at the beginning because he actually like just got on because he lives in Ireland, so he got on Zoom with us and. Or Skype, and we kind of like hashed out what we want to do for volume 2,
Yeah.
like what we was excited to draw, and it was a
That
really
was-
nice organic process.
That was really cool too, Frank. Like, obviously, you've collaborated and done more books, so you would be able to answer this. I know for us, every issue, at the beginning of every issue, before Rory starts drawing, all three of us get on like a video call and we hash it out like for like 2-3 hours. You know, like whether he's thumbnailing it, we just go over the beats to like finalize everything. Obviously, before he puts pencil to paper. Is that a normal thing for you, Frank, to do like with other people, or is that because I remember Rory's done a lot of stuff too, and he's like, "This is cool. I don't really do this much," so it seems like it's kind of our own unique thing.
Not at Marvel and DC or like
Yeah,
companies where like you have like editorial processing everything, because it's very like, I don't want to sound pejorative and say like machinery, like factory, but it's like, again, you're part of a process and it's bigger. But like with our own stuff, like any of my creator-owned books, like I make an effort to actually sit down and like go over the thumbnails. And I was just doing this with someone, and it was like, yeah, it's not because I'm checking your work. We're just like excited and make sure that like we're communicating what we want, instead of just like, there's many books, and again, not putting it down, but there's many books where I've written a script, sent it off, and the next time you see it, it's in the store. It's like, cool, like that's how it goes.
Well, a lot of cool ideas made it into the book that happened like that. Like, it's not a spoiler. Issue 2 is already out, but at the first page of issue 2 is where you see Infinite. If you've read the first volume, where you see him real little fighting, this giant alien, and that was happening while we're hashing out. Because something came up, and I was like, oh, we need to like start tying it together, so we'll put this here. And then Rui's like, oh, it could be this big thing. And then a day or two later, he sent this concept of this huge like squid shark monster thing, and it just kind of rolled with it. And now that whole Infinite thing became a massive part of the story as you read, because it's one of like the cruxes to what's going on within the clan. So it's funny how like one little thing will happen, and then it kind of spirals to be like a big point of the story.
Definitely. Now, Frank might be able to answer this more, but obviously you've written a lot. You've seen your books come out. You've seen your stuff on the shelf. Was it enjoyable? Because Eric said, I mean, for you, like seeing your first book, like seeing your name on a cover is crazy. And here he's like, oh yeah, hey, congratulations, our book's on the shelf. And you're like, this is amazing. I don't know if it was enjoyable.
Dude, I'll tell you the trippiest thing. Like, it was trippy going to the local comic book store, obviously seeing it just like, my local shop here where I live. But for me, the one that really, really hit home was 2022 Comic-Con. So 2 years ago, I was in New York, obviously New York Comic-Con. So I had to go to Midtown Comics Times Square. So I went there. And then while I was there, I'm like, oh, duh, I have a book. Let's see if it's here. And, I go alphabet A. I'm like, holy crap. And they had a few copies of it. So a book that I, co-wrote, co-created is in Midtown Comics, like one of the biggest, comic book shops in the country. And few people who work there recognize me from doing the Variant Comics, the YouTube show.
That's super cute, because no one recognized me ever.
So I was like, yo, can I sign it? And then, I'll put it on social and people can get a signed copy from, one of the creators of the book. And I did that, and they sold out within 30 minutes, they said. So I was like, that's dope.
And then Eris has got to see me just be grouchy about it the whole time. Not care that's out. I mean, not care, but it is the one thing that doing the deal with Comixology and having our books be digital issues, Eris had to wait extra long to get that physical trade, but he got it. Yeah, so
it's got the Dark Horse logo on there. Hellboy, Umbrella Academy.
That's right. You guys are all linked.
You should call Mike Minola right now.
I'm about to say, can Hellboy appear in the next Astonishing Times?
I'm going to say probably not, but who knows?
Let's get Mignola on the phone. Let's get him on.
Oh, God.
Perfect. Let me send him an invite really quick.
Yeah. Get him on the podcast real quick.
All right, we're gonna settle this tonight. Now you guys have a pretty decent amount of characters, especially having read the first Astonishing Times. Do you guys each have a favorite character, or one that you put maybe a little bit more kind of love or detail into because that resonated with you more in the story?
I know I certainly do.
Go ahead and start, because I don't want to say the same person.
Okay.
Push myself away from
I have two, but the edge would go to Kokin for sure. I think that's kind of universal across the board, hence us all agreeing that he's going to get the first character to get a solo series. It's just because he's that vigilante Batman, Punisher, Wolverine, street level type, right? And that's always a fan favorite. Because you could do a lot with him, like because Infinite would be my second, but he's more the Boy Scout, right? So like he's cool in different ways, but with a character like Kokin, where he's an anti-hero, you can do a lot more with it, so it's just fun. But yeah, it's just that also he's a samurai. Like I remember going over it with Frank before we even got Ruri on board. It's like, we're discussing it and going back and forth. It's like, oh no, samurai would be cool, but we'll do like a futuristic cyberpunk samurai. So that way he could be samurai, which is already like super badass, but with like futuristic tech to make it even cooler. And then all these, these little things and stuff like that. So, and then Ruri just nailed the look. Like it was super hard to get that look down. I would say, Frank, would you agree that was like the hardest look to nail down? Because we had multiple versions.
And it was the most, like, again, because it's the easiest to fall into, I think, a lot of like very typical traps, but I feel like it was cool that he gave him like the unique mask that we were using, and then we like kind of tied that into then like the clans and stuff later. So like Ruri is a exceptional like character designer as well. Like we have, I think, some in the back of the trade, but he very much did like process for everyone. Is like, oh, let me like really think about like every part of their costuming and things like that. And it's so fun to have someone like that as a collaborator, as sometimes you'll be like, I don't know, what about this? And someone's creativity will go and then you'll vibe with it, versus just like, well, it's one of the things that's hard about monthly comics is like your artistic collaborators are designing on the page a lot of times. Like it's just like, oh, suddenly like this character has an airship and we've never seen it before, but you have a day to draw it. So good luck. Like we were fortunate enough to have enough lead time where Ruri did a ton of design work, which is cool and really, I think, elevated a lot.
For sure. We did some episodes on variant, like breaking down each character. And for several of them, you could see like we have like sheets that Ruri brilliantly made where, even his weapons, he'll put like notes. It's like, shoots electrical bolt from the staff and you see it like comes out. It's like acts like a taser. So there's a lot of detail and thought that went into it. Because I'm personally too very detailed. Frank knows, probably to a fault, where I'm like, it's all got to lead to this, a continuity. It's all got to match. If we said this here, then it's got to stick to this. And Frank's like, it's digital. We can change it.
Yeah, if we get a character's name, we can move it. There's only one book where I accidentally forgot a character's name in my own book and called them two different things in the issues, and immediately people like called it out in reviews, were like, did they change the name of this character? I'm just like, Jesus, like, come on. And also there was a typo. I wrote the Pacific Northeast instead of the Pacific Northwest. That was a career highlight for me. That made it into print in that book as well. And fixed it for the trade though. So,
Frank, but you didn't answer. Is your favorite character Kokin as well? Or is it
I like
else?
Kokin a lot, but I really do like where we end up with Infinite as well, because like, obviously like he's the Superman archetype. And we also had him kind of do clearly in volume 1, he has like a plot, and really like, again, it's tropey to do that, but I'm psyched with where we came up with that. He has a backstory where we're able to show like, oh, like, again, there's some interesting twists there, and that he is optimistic and not quite like Ozymandias from Watchmen, but more of like, hey, this is someone willing to go as far as they will to help the world, but it comes from a place where he saw another world destroyed, versus just being like super smart or being super good for him as being Superman. So he is definitely someone I'm excited to hopefully like jump into in a future volume as well, and explore his past and what he was like as like a prime superhero in our universe versus where we see him in volume 1, which is what we were just talking about. Volume 1 is interesting because it's almost the end of a lot of stories in this world, and we like spread a lot of tendrils out, but now we're in a place where we'd like to go back and really show like, oh, who were these heroes in their prime and things like that. And the design for him, I think, came out great too, because again, we very much like did not want to have just like a guy wearing a Superman costume.
Yeah.
But the first book really did. Sorry, go for it, please.
Oh no, you might be. Probably not. You can go.
No, I was going to go on a huge tangent, so please.
Well, I will add then. I'll add on the back end of that for a future Infinite, potential series. I think the origin we have outlined right now is really, really cool. I'm really excited about. I think I love Kokin's origin, but the first initial part of Infinites, I think, is just really unique of what we've talked about and stuff like that. So I would love to see how people would receive it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's great because I was gonna say, especially from the first book, and where you got the idea for Astonishing Times. Obviously, it's very reminiscent of kind of like a Watchmen story. I think that's what's nice when you pick it up. You kind of have that sense of familiarity with it. But I do like, and spoiler for anyone listening, you can go and read it at Comixology as soon as we're done with this podcast. You should go read it. It was nice that you guys made. There wasn't like a redemption. Like, I mean, like Infinite, like at the end of the kind of the volume, like he was the bad guy. He admitted that he kind of flew the coop. Which in a lot of comic books, like they're never willing to fess up. They're like, no, this is still fixable. This is, it's gonna be fine. He's like, no, I guess I got a little out of sorts.
A little hasty.
I mean, and that is the thing too, like of doing our own continuity. That's nice too. Like we wanted to like take these characters to a place where we didn't have to worry about resetting them. Like, and this is meant to be like, again, like I don't know, like after a lifetime, and I think that's what Watchmen did really interestingly. Of one of many things, and obviously we don't aspire to do like that hard deconstruction like that. Ours was meant more of like almost a celebration, but at the same time, like the stresses of trying to save everyone, of trying to be Superman, like I think it is a very logical line to look at some of these heroes and think about like how would they feel if they want to do more, like what lines would they cross, like what would they really push for. And again, I know it's a well-mined area, but we really wanted to do it through the lens of Noah kind of being like optimistic and still willing to like look past and be like, wait, like you don't have to just, again, look at things as like a hardcore realist. You can be optimistic. And I feel like that's where we managed to hopefully have a little bit of the grace note at the end and push forward. But again, we it's fun to break our own toys, so to speak. And again, if you've read Volume 1, we certainly do break some of them. So
yes,
for sure. People comment it's always kind of funny that like we literally started our universe at the end.
On page 2, we break something. Yeah,
it's like literally at the end of it all. So it's kind of like there's definitely, if you've read it at the end, there's definitely like teases of potential stuff for the future. But like at the same time, it's clearly like on the downtick of like the peak of this universe in a sense, and it's ready for like a rebirth now, so it's interesting to be like, I always say we Tarantino'd it, where it's like, this is the end, now let's go back, let's see how we got there. And there's lots to go back because these heroes, they're the legacy heroes, like the Gold Rush, Infinite, and all that stuff. So now there's lots of stuff we could tell before these characters got to that point. So I think that's I'm not saying that's a completely like brand new take, but I feel like it is a fresh enough take in superhero comics that you don't see much, where it's like, this is the end, but now we're literally just going to go all the way. Everything we tell you now, for the most part, is like past. I think that's fun.
I think like Jeff Lemire did it really well with Black Hammer. Like that was a really that was something I pointed to a lot. Like, oh, look at like, again, he used the archetypes, but like found a story to tell in there and has like spun it out in so many cool ways as well. And it's inspiring to see stuff like that because, again, you're not going to always completely invent the wheel, but if you can find something you want to say with it, that's more of my argument and why we chose like to start there with Astonishing Times. Because I swear, like, I have the good fortune to have written enough comics that like all the like baseline ideas like I had like growing up or like early on I've been able to do. And the one that was like on a post-it note on my old Mac was like superhero journalist, like question mark. Like, and that's when I brought to Eris. I was like, oh, you know what I always want to kind of do, like a story like this. And a real big push for me was like to do a story that wasn't really like tongue in cheek about like obviously like the popularity of superheroes in the modern age, but like that showed a protagonist who can organically like the concept of superheroes and not make them like a joke or not put them down, because like I think so much superhero stuff like wants to like be like, this is dorky and like wink at you or like kind of like put down people, but it's like, no, this stuff is like really inspiring. It means a lot to a lot of people and there's a reason it perpetuates. And that was our like, guess kind of grandiose thing, and why we want a character like Noah who like unapologetically believes in like the like thematic material of being a hero, which again is like, without being super nerdy, like, and I think we touch on it a little in our opening narration, but like it is like why we like mythic heroes and things like that. And I feel like with like everything that has happened with like superhero movies blowing up and things becoming ubiquitous, it's still, I don't know, people still like weirdly like act like it's not part of the culture. And we definitely did not want to like make a series that felt like it was like talking down to the audience or making anyone feel like, oh, like this is not a valid genre, or this is not a valid I don't know, like theme to live by. That was my grandiose shit when we're like, let's do superheroes. I'm like, okay, but this is what I want to do with it. And again, Eris
I remember when I
covers that for a living, so I mean, like, clearly it resonated with him as well.
Yeah, no, it was great. I remember when I initially came to, it was a completely different idea, which I still have, and I think we should just do, or I should do later, because it's different enough where it's its own thing. But
it was definitely meaner. I'll say, not to
spoil. It was meaner. Yeah, it was more. Yeah, it was definitely not so much of a celebration as it was like. Yeah, I don't. It's probably going to happen eventually, so I won't say anything. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how stories evolve and change. It's fun because again, the first volume of AT was my first time, so I learned a lot and still learning a lot. So it's just very cool because I talk about comics for a living all the time, but it's completely different to make them. You could report and review and give your opinion, to your blue in the face, but once you're in it doing it, you're like, oh. Okay, and you learn things. Yeah, and you learn things that make sense. You're like, okay, like that's why they did this. And then even hearing like other people, like Frank, or just becoming friends with like Josh Williamson or any other writer, and just learning like behind the scenes. You're like, oh yeah, okay. There's other cogs at play. Got it.
Exactly. So the reason we're here is obviously you guys have out Astonishing Times: The Rise of Kokin. How does it feel? No, I mean, you essentially established the end goal of Astonishing Times, and now we're kind of backtracking to show kind of the superheroes that are involved in their kind of rise to prominence. Does it feel kind of easier because you have so much? Like, you didn't establish like a hard backstory for each one in your first, so now you have so much room to expand on these origins.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really cool. I mean, we already have a rough idea for all the main characters, like Infinite, Kokin, Gold Rush. Like, we more or less know what their origins are, like as far as like the bullet points. But it was really fun going in, detailing that out, while you do that stuff, change and building it out and stuff like that. Like originally, like we always knew one of the big things that I said to Frank is like, I want the Kokin mantle to not be like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, not just like, oh yeah, spider power, so he's Spider-Man. Oh, he dresses like a bat, so he's Batman. No, I want it to be like a mantle that you earn. And then organically through there, when we started writing Rise of Kokin, we're like, oh, well, what about there's like factions? There's like more than one Kokin because there's like different elements of it, and it just kind of grew. So we had like the baseline of it, but yeah, it's really fun how it evolved.
And it was like fun to do like genre wise because it is very much like even though we don't put like a date on it, but it's like meant to like homage kind of like 80s action comics, like very like Daredevil, like Miller stuff, which again is not super in vogue now for the most part, but I feel like it is like fun. Again, there's a lot of good stuff there, and it is the kind of thing where like using some of those genre elements is cool, and like Ruri is drawing it super well, and like Andrew's keeping it very like color drenched in the kind of like
colors are gorgeous for that because it's so different than volume 1 too. Like I like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that for another spin-off book we do, I'm sure they'll all look very different, which I think is because it establishes like this is Kokin's vibe, this is Infinite's vibe, this is Gold Rush's vibe. You know what I mean? So I was one of the things I like most about it, how like it's the same character, but it feels so different.
And just doing like, as I said, like doing our own kind of like revenge story and adding our own like turns to it. As I feel like again, I'm thinking of where we're at in 3. Like it's like building a fun puzzle. Like I feel like someone described writing this way once, and I really said about it. It's like you're like solving a maze, but first you're making the maze, and it needs to be both like satisfying to solve in the end, but you also have to build it knowing where it's going. And like, again, we knew like, oh, Kokin is missing an arm. Like, how did that happen? And we had like a bullet point about it, but then actually getting to do the seed here is really fun. And really starting in issue 4, like we get to see a new status quo, like where he's kind of lost and then has to kind of like build his way back up. And that's a really fun story to tell and way to establish like, again, the character, it's fun because, like, again, in volume 1, we tell you, like, oh, this character is, like, tough and has seen a lot of stuff. And to actually go back and be like, oh, well, here's what he's seen and how we got there has been a really fun exercise to do. And then to do it in this genre space is exciting as well.
Definitely. For everyone listening that may want to jump in, what would you say is the brief synopsis of this storyline for Kokin?
You want to take it, Frank? No,
either.
I'll give a brief. I guess I'll give a brief rundown. So it's essentially, like Frank said, it's in a nutshell, it's a revenge story. But the summary would be a young army brat, basically does not have a good time with his father, leaves his father, ends up getting taken by this mystery person who eventually ends up training him. And it's kind of like almost like Stockholm syndrome in a sense, right? Like we don't say it just kind of happens as it progresses, where you realize, as time passes, he's like, yo, you kidnapped me, but you're also like training me and you've given me this thing to focus on. So now you're kind of like my new father, because I never really liked my father. And, without giving too much away, twists and turns happen, things happen to where young Kokin is pulled into like this revenge story of like what's going this on, and he eventually realizes there's clans at play and Sensei was part of this bigger thing. But it basically just if you know Kokin from volume 1, we already told you that Kokin is a title, so you basically learn who the Kokin are, where they're from, like how did he get taken and brought into this clan, because he's not he's an American, he's not Japanese, so it's like how the freak did this army American kid get brought into like this elite clan from Japan, or clans, so it's just fleshing out that, and by the end we loop it back around to how he gets back to where he was at some point in volume 1.
Yeah, and it was nice. I mean, in your first volume and everything, I mean, when him and Infinite were going at it kind of on the island, he said like, I pity you because you're just a human who can't trust anyone. And you always wonder like what leads up to that, like why can't you trust? And I mean, getting an arm lost here or there and that I wouldn't trust anyone either, especially being someone on the outside and seeing an outsider.
Ruri drew him so like friendly and happy as like a young person too. I'm like, oh, buddy.
Yeah, that scene where he does lose his hand or arm. I remember we were talking. We're like, well, should it be this or should it be that? Well, like we knew who was gonna do it, because that that ultimately is gonna play with the end of the story. But it was like, how should we do it? And I forget what I said. I had an idea. We eventually didn't go with it for whatever reason, but it was basically me wanting to be like big and over dramatic, but I'm like, no, but we should do this. And it ended up not really working.
I was like, no, man, it happens at the end of the scene. Like we can make it cool. But I can't remember what you said. I'm trying to remember now, but like
I don't remember either. But I remember I was like, yeah, I guess you're right, because it didn't flow with the story the way I wanted to do it. We would have to like change too many things around, and it just didn't work.
No, I'm really like I'm really proud of how quickly we got like in the first issue. Like I feel like the pacing feels good, even though we cover like essentially his whole use. Like not to celebrate our own work, but just like comics is always that sprint against time, because typically you only have about like 22 pages when you're writing a standard length comic, and like we really wanted to make sure we were like using our time well, that we were still spending time enough with the character to get to know kind of who they are and like build some empathy, but also like get to the fact like, oh, he's been trained. And I love the like training montage pages that Ruri and Andrew did, like really just again, I feel like effectively give a different vibe, and you can look at each of those and feel like they're fun. It's funny because like obviously there's parallels to Batman as well. But like, I like that even though Kokin is a similar like vigilante type character, like his training, which much more of this like celebratory, like, oh, this cool guy is like my surrogate father now and training me versus like bouncing around from like sensei to sensei and things like that.
Yeah. Now with this series, obviously you're establishing an origin for a character that we're familiar with. After this origin story is kind of told, do you see yourself just moving on to like the next origin story, or kind of giving him like not as big of an like 600 issues of Batman, like he now fights the Riddler in the streets, but like kind of giving him like a year 1 or year 2, like maybe how like mid credit, like mid scene.
Yeah, and like kind of flesh
Where-
out like who his villains are back like in America
Yeah.
and stuff like that, like his rogues gallery. We've definitely
Yeah.
talked about it. I know we would really like to do Infinite next, kind of bounce around, but I think we definitely want to keep telling stories for each of these characters. It's just a matter of what we get to first, and honestly what the audience wants too, because if like people are like more Kokin, it's like, all right, well, we love Kokin, we'll do it again, but we also think people will really like a solo Infinite series, because that's a whole different, that's more of like your OP type, Superman Sentry type character, so it's kind of a different thing and fun in its own way, because then you could have them like blowing up planets and stuff like that. But
I just feel fortunate that we've managed to like make something where we can see those stories, because like the hardest thing is the other way around, like where you make something and you really have to pull your hair out like to get more out of it. So we're just excited to play where we can, and like we feel like obviously keeping it in self-contained volumes is nice, but again, I'd love to do more here, but there's also a wide swath of people we can play with in this world.
For sure. We've also teased doing a Justice League Avengers-esque book explaining the Cataclysm.
I feel like that's the big one for me, because we talk about that like with like a big like capital C in in the aftermath, and that I feel like is a really natural spot to build towards, that I would love to actually get all of that material out in a book. So
for sure, because we show flashbacks of it, in volume 1. So that's a big one. That'd be fun.
I feel like that was like some of the most like superhero-y stuff we got Riri to draw too, because like I remember just the first issue, it's like, and we're gonna spend a lot of time with this guy and his family. Like this is our superhero book. Like, but again, it's the kind of thing where I feel like that always does pay off. Especially the hardest thing for me with creator owned, right, is that like you have so little space to introduce people to brand new characters, and you have to try to get them to like it quickly, and like it's super hard. It's always hard. Like people take it for granted. Like the number one thing I like about working on kind of established IP is like you have those like people bought in already. You don't need to convince anyone Spider-Man is cool. You can just kind of get to your story and move through it. But again, it pays off when it works, but there's always a little bit of stress of balancing like, okay, like how much time are we going to take to get it out there versus get right to the promise of our story? Like what's going to be cool about it?
Definitely. Cataclysm would be a great one. Mainly I want to see Gold Rush, because man, he got the short end of the stick in volume 1.
Yeah, I was at page 2. Then you see him in a flashback for a second.
Well, that Gold Rush is really interesting, because I remember I just like the power set we came up for him, because he's like a different speedster where all those gold discs on him, like he could pull them off and like transfer his speed into them to like throw them around almost like multiple Captain America shields, but like as fast as light. And Ruri did it really cool, like drawing when we talked about it. So I would just like, because he's a different take on a speedster, because like there's so many fast characters, like you're gonna do it, like you have to bring something kind of new to the table. But like that would be a fun one too. Plus, I think he really looks cool. I like the white on gold. I think that's he kind of reminds me of like a New God almost in some ways in design. But I love him.
Yeah. Now, so this is creator owned. I mean, obviously, you have the Dark Horse logo on there, but I mean, for the most part, everything is just your team kind of in and out of these comic books.
Yes, well, it's one of the things that's been super fun. Like, I love working with editors when I do, but this is just all us, which is great. It's all our own stuff. We're the only people we have to put it past. We just basically send the book to print, kind of like just doing it at Image is the same way. So it's nice that we don't have anyone being like, no, don't kill that guy, or what do you
Yeah,
do?
I've been spoiled on this for sure because Comixology's been great. They're just like, yeah, whatever you want to do, yeah, sure.
Turn
Dark
it-
Horse, same thing. They're like, yeah, cool.
Turn in the book and we'll print it and tell you if there's a typo, but no one gives like story notes. Again, sometimes that's great, but with this, it's been nice to have the freedom to just do what we want.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, the biggest thing with as you progress and you put out these multiple stories, to stay creator owned, or if there was ever opportunity to collab and or go with like a bigger publishing, like kind of would you take that opportunity just to then be able to cross over to an established IP with your characters?
That is interesting. I feel like have not thought about it and not on our radars, but
Yeah.
whatever. I'd never say never to anything in this.
I was gonna
life.
say I'll never say never. It would just depend on like, because ideally you'd always want to stay creator owned, right? I mean, just look, because with creator owned, the end goal would be like, McFarlane with Spawn, Kirkman with like The Walking Dead, Invincible, like, where they're just mammoths on their own and they don't need anyone because everyone just loves what they've created. So that's like the end goal. But at the same time, like, anything's possible and it could be cool if it's like a Wildstorm situation or like, hey man, like you could have your, Grifter be with Batman. That'd be cool. Or like, Kokin team up with like, Nightwing or something. That'd be dope.
I was just saying, at the end of the day, I'm not a hater. So
Yeah, I'd be all for a Kokin and Katana team up. Two samurais going at it.
That would be fun.
Now you have a very unique set of characters. If you had to pick a story where they were versing either like a Justice League or an Avengers, do you have a preference of who they'd go up against?
Oh man, I'm a little more partial to DC just because Batman got me into comic books. So just organically, DC was my entryway because after Batman, it's like, oh, I'm already at DC. So who's Deathstroke or whoever else, Green Lanterns. So probably Justice League. Although I would say the Avengers might be a better fit because Marvel is kind of, they're not like the god so much to speak. They're more a little street tier. They don't have like like the Wonder Woman, freaking Martian Manhunter, Superman, who are all like these super powerhouses. So Avengers might be a better fit, but I'm more partial to Justice League. So if I had to vote, I'd say Justice League.
DC. I am more partial to Marvel and Avengers. I would say Avengers.
I mean, awesome. I love Spider-Man's my second favorite superhero, so I'm down for that too.
Yeah, that'd be great. Kind of the last question before we get all you guys' information so people can find you. Where do you see yourself and kind of what you created coming down these next few years? What's the ideal timeline?
Oh man, I would like ideally every year there to be something new, like hopefully this time next year or end of 2025, mid 2025 we have we've either announced or dropping the first issue for something else, because we've obviously behind the scenes we're like, well, what can we do, do we want to, what can we do? So gears are turning, but perfect world I'd hope to have at least one title every year. That way it also stays fresh in everyone's mind. You don't want to be like, oh, didn't they do that thing like 4 years ago and now they're bringing it back? Because it's also, you got to keep it fresh, and that's how you build on it. Get that anticipation every year there's something new. Because I would love to be like 2025 we're going to do Infinite, 2026 we're going to do the Cataclysm, 2027 or like we're going to do 2 books in 1 year. We're going to do like a 3-issue Gold Rush series and like a 5-issue this. Like I'm down for all of it. So as long as people like it, I want to keep doing it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Like I said, I just hope we can keep doing it with good velocity. So.
All right. So obviously, First Astonishing Times Volume 1 is on Comixology. Rise of Kokin, I believe, is also on Comixology.
Yep.
Issue 1 and 2 issue 2 is already out. 3rd is in the works.
3's out as well.
3 is out as well.
Now, obviously, everyone can go to Comixology. Are you guys doing a LCS and comic distributorship for this as well, or is it strictly Comixology?
The trade should be. It will be significantly later, but again, we're still working out and getting the final dates on that. But again, we typically do them print through Dark Horse after publication, so hopefully we will have that coming as well soon.
All right. So for everyone interested,
I will say we do have.
Oh, yes, you can.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say we do have ash cans. So actually, I could probably grab one. I got one right here. We got it. So we did do ash cans There's the first 5 pages of issue 1 and got Kokin right there. That we have a limit. I think we got like 150 of them. Or we're gonna be selling them on Variant Comics, which is the YouTube channel I host. So if anyone wants to get, it's gonna be signed by all 3 of us too. Three of the me, myself, Frank, and Ruri. So you'll get all 3 signatures on it, and it's a New York Comic Con exclusive, but limited to 200. So that's how you get that. You'll be able to get that physical before you get the trade, probably like sometime next year or something like that.
Awesome. So where can everyone find you to keep up with kind of your updates on here and to get in on this comic book, your Ashcan that you guys got out?
So as far as for the Ashcan we got out, that's going to be on Variant, youtube.com/variant. We're going to announce that within the next week or so on where and how you can get it, prices, all that stuff. For me personally, socials, Eris_Quinones on TikTok, ErisQ on Instagram, and Eris_Quinones on X/Twitter. Is anyone used to that yet? Like calling Twitter X? I'm still not used to it. Since I just say Twitter/X.
Yeah. No. All right. All right. So we'll have everyone linked up to the show for this, and we'll hopefully have you guys back on to discuss further. Because, like I said, I really want to see the Cataclysm. That's going to be such a great thing on paper. The shots you've had before are fantastic.
We have ideas, and Rory would nail that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So everyone listening will have this linked on our Instagram and in the comments below. So give them a follow and stay tuned. They got a lot on the works. All right. Everyone have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.